drugfree.org. You're not alone.
Well, we have some new reports that the U.S. could hand over the leadership role of the Libya mission to NATO maybe as soon as Sunday. But criticism continues of the president's handling of the crisis from both sides of the political aisle. In an editorial today in the Wall Street Journal, conservative columnist Peggy Noonan says this, quote, "I cannot for the life of me see how an American president can launch a serious military action without a full and formal national address in which he explains to the American people why he's doing what he's doing, why it's right, and why it's very much in the national interest." So does the president need to explain himself? Let's talk a little bit more about this with Josh Block, a former Clinton administration official and State Department spokesman. Also, Stephen Yates is with us, former deputy assistant to Vice President Cheney for National Security Affairs. And welcome to you both, gentlemen. Josh, starting with you, why hasn't the president made this type of address?
Well, it's a really good question. I mean, I think at the end of the day, a speech is not a strategy. So if the president does give a speech, he's going to have to lay out quite clearly what our objectives are, what we're willing to do to enforce those objectives. And at the end of the day, you know, Colonel Gaddafi has said he wants to die a martyr. I think it's America's opportunity and duty to give him that chance.
Do you think he has this strategy, Josh? Do you think the president knows exactly what we're doing?
Well, I mean, the White House has articulated quite clearly that the no-fly zone is engendered to enforce the UN resolution, that in America's policy and that of some of our allies is that Colonel Gaddafi has to go. At the end of the day, once we say that kind of thing, we better do it. Iran is watching other rogue states. They better not believe America's a paper tiger, or we're going to have much worse problems down the road.
Stephen, your thoughts on what Josh just said, and also just a response to this. Some say, listen, it's not war. We haven't declared war. This doesn't need an Oval Office address.
Well, I think the latter part of the question is borderline crazy. I mean, when you're dropping bombs on another country, if it's not war, I have a hard time imagining what it is. Overseas contingency operation, perhaps. But the serious answer, I mean, I think that Peggy Noonan is correct. It is exceedingly unusual for a commander-in-chief to send forces into a foreign land without an address to the nation about why and what national interest it advances. And I agree very much with what Josh said. A speech is not sufficient. He really needs to explain what changed in Libya. Why was it that he decided that Muammar Gaddafi, compared to all the other dictators in the world, had lost legitimacy and must go? What does this have to do with his broader strategy for the region? When and how he will use force? And in terms of others seeking freedom around the world, what does it say about his strategy for helping them versus the autocrats that stand on their shoulders and heads? And so I think there's a lot for him to answer, and the only reason he hasn't so far is perhaps the answers aren't good, or his political advisors say we want distance between Libya and year 2012.
Josh, as a political advisor to a Democratic administration, what kind of insight can you give on what Stephen just said? And is it too late to do anything now?
It's certainly not too late. I mean, I think there's a tremendous opportunity here, an opportunity that the White House has not yet seized. You know, if the president were to stand up and lay out the fact that America has a unique role in the world, we are a light unto the nations, we are the leader of the free world, and President Kennedy laid it out quite clearly in his inaugural address, you know, support any friend, oppose any foe, to ensure the success and survival of liberty and the human rights that America stands for. At the end of the day, the president has a great opportunity to lay out his vision, as Stephen describes, for what the region is undergoing, what our vision is. The bad guys are out there trying to bend the arc of history in their evil direction. What are we and the West going to do to ensure that the transition we see is toward tolerance, freedom, democracy, liberalism, and the kind of region that we want to see?
You know, Stephen, you touched a little bit on this, just picking up off of what Josh just said about the region. It's not just this administration, but previous administrations as well that have obviously gone into North Africa and the Middle East with an agenda in mind and a strategy. As a nation, what is our strategy in the region? What do we want to do there? Why are we even there? Are these some broader questions that have to be considered when an address potentially like this one is made on just one country such as Libya?
Right. Well, those are all very important questions, and there are, I think, two big factors that are different now than what previous administrations have faced, Republican or Democrat. One is President Obama stepped forward and said Muammar Gaddafi must go. And I think that there is a massive strategic risk in leaving him in power, having been provoked this way and being able to return to pursuit of WMD, support for terrorism, and a whole host of other dangerous things. So there's that factor that did not exist with previous administrations. And secondly, there has been an indigenous movement across this region that has not been there in the past to work with. This administration has a unique opportunity to work with, enable those forces, and I think that as a strategic and historic opportunity, I don't get confidence from what the administration is saying now that this limited mission can really help in that regard, and I think that's a mistake and perhaps tragic.
Well, it wouldn't be the first time for this president, though, to turn some criticism into a success for himself, and we'll see as this continues to develop. Stephen and Josh, thank you so much for your insights today, gentlemen. Look forward to talking to you again.